Escort her out. Now. The words sliced through the lobby like a knife as two security guards closed in on the modestly dressed black woman at the counter. But just as their hands reached for her, she calmly pulled out her phone, placed it on speaker, and said, "Elliot, this is Dr. Naomi Ellis. You're going to want to hear this." The marble floor of Harrington Trust Bank's Midtown branch gleamed under the soft morning light as streams of well-dressed customers flowed through the revolving doors. A low murmur of polite conversation mixed with the steady clicks of heels and the rustle of tailored coats. Behind the reception desk, smiles came easy if you fit the part. Carly Benson, the blonde, well-poised receptionist with pearl earrings and a script-polished voice, offered warm greetings to every familiar face that walked in. "Good morning, Mr. Dempsey." Right this way to the executive lounge, she beamed as an older white man in a navy pinstripe suit passed through. No need for a ticket, no wait time. Not even a glance toward the others who'd arrived before him. That quiet hierarchy, unspoken but razor-sharp, governed everything here. But in the far corner of the lobby, barely noticed, stood a petite black woman in a weathered gray jacket, dark jeans and sneakers with worn soles. Her canvas tote, faded and creased, hung loosely over her shoulder. No one gave her more than a passing glance. That was the point. Dr. Naomi Ellis, 51, paused before the kiosk and tapped the touchscreen, pulling a number for the teller queue. She took a seat at the far end of the lobby, folding her hands calmly in her lap. Her eyes moved slowly, not nervously, but with quiet precision, taking in every interaction, every uneven tone of voice, every raised eyebrow. From the outside, she appeared no different than any other middle-aged woman managing an errand between appointments. But Naomi Ellis was not just another customer. She was the president of the Harrington Cooperative Division, the very branch of the bank tasked with advancing ethical practices and financial equity. And today she had come with a mission. Not to hold meetings or give press conferences, but to observe. To feel firsthand the same treatment countless clients had complained about for years. Disrespect, disbelief, disregard. As minutes dragged on, Naomi watched the pattern unfold like a cruel ballet. A young white woman in designer yoga gear entered, smiled sweetly at Carly, and was escorted directly to a teller without even pulling a number. Carly cooed, "You're glowing today, Grace." Just a deposit, Naomi shifted slightly in her seat, noting the time 9:14 a.m. Grace was done and walking out by 9:17. Moments later, a middle-aged Latino man in a janitor's uniform stepped up to ask a question. Carly didn't rise. She pointed vaguely toward the back. "You'll need to take a number and wait, sir." No smile, no tone, just dismissal. At 9:27, an elderly black woman entered with a cane, cautiously moving toward the front desk. Carly barely looked up. Next. Naomi's expression remained unchanged, but inside her, certainty solidified. The divide here wasn't policy, it was perception. At 9:46, nearly 45 minutes after Naomi entered the building, Carly finally called her number, 43, window 5. Naomi stood with the same quiet grace she had maintained all morning and stepped toward the counter. The teller, Brittany Hale, was a woman in her early 30s with carefully curled auburn hair and a lavender cardigan. She offered a thin, polite smile, but her eyes dropped to Naomi's outfit, scanning with subtle disapproval. "What can I help you with today?" Her voice was neutral, but her posture stiffened. Naomi placed 3 items on the counter, her government-issued ID, her bank card, and a withdrawal slip. "I'd like to withdraw $85,000 from my personal account. All documents are here." Brittany blinked twice. The number clearly threw her off. 85,000, she repeated, her tone inching toward disbelief. "Yes," Naomi said calmly from checking. Brittany hesitated. Instead of processing the transaction, she glanced toward the next window where Dennis Shaw, the head teller, was reviewing receipts. With a small tilt of her head, she signaled him over. Dennis, a heavy-set man in his late 40s with a bald crown and wire-rimmed glasses, strolled over, taking his time. His expression shifted the moment he saw Naomi. "What's going on?" he asked Brittany, who leaned in to whisper. "She wants to pull out 85 grand. Dennis raised an eyebrow, looked at the documents, then looked at Naomi. "Is this your first time requesting an amount this large?" Naomi met his eyes without flinching. "No, and I've been a client here for years. My information is current." Dennis let out a low breath through his nose and nodded slowly, but instead of approving the process, he leaned back and spoke to someone just beyond the partition. Veronica, he called. We've got a large cash request here. The temperature in the air seemed to drop. Seconds later, the door behind the teller line swung open and branch manager Veronica Tate emerged, a tall woman with sharp cheekbones, sleek black heels, and a no-nonsense presence. She looked every inch the gatekeeper of the institution. Her eyes swept the counter, landing on Naomi. Her brow furrowed. "What's the issue?" Dennis replied. "Customer is requesting an $85,000 withdrawal. ID and documents check out, but it seemed irregular." Veronica didn't even glance at the paperwork. Her focus remained locked on Naomi. "We don't release this kind of money to people like her," she said flatly, not even bothering to lower her voice. A beat of stunned silence passed. Brittany's mouth parted in quiet disbelief. Dennis looked down at the counter. Naomi, standing still, gave no outward reaction, only a deep, steady breath as her gaze remained fixed on Veronica. Veronica continued louder this time. "Call security. Have her escorted out immediately. This doesn't feel right." The lobby went quiet. Conversation stopped. A few heads turned. A white man in a suit whispered, "What's going on?" Naomi reached into her tote bag with unhurried purpose. From the inside pocket, she pulled out an old black cell phone. Her fingers moved over the screen as calmly as if dialing a family member. She lifted the phone to her ear. It rang once. Then a male voice answered, Elliot Grant. Naomi didn't look at Veronica, Dennis, or Brittany. Instead, she spoke clearly into the phone, her voice low, but firm enough for the lobby to hear. "Elliot, this is Naomi Ellis. I'm at Midtown Branch attempting a legal withdrawal. I'm being accused, denied, and security has been called. I'm placing you on speaker so you can hear everything." A hush spread across the room. The two security guards, tall men in navy suits, arrived at the teller line and flanked Naomi, waiting for a signal to act. Carly peeked nervously over her desk. Veronica's face, once cool and smug, twitched with uncertainty. "Ma'am, you need to leave," she said sharply. "Now!" Naomi didn't budge. Instead, she turned the phone face up on the counter, letting Elliot's voice fill the space. "I'm hearing everything he said." His voice carried weight, the voice of someone who belonged to the top floor of the ivory tower. "Who exactly is ordering her removal?" Brittany's hands trembled. Dennis took a step back. Veronica narrowed her eyes but offered no answer. Naomi lifted her chin slightly. "As you can see, Elliot, I've presented full identification. I've followed protocol. I have not raised my voice, nor have I created a scene. The only thing I've done is ask for my own money." Several customers now had phones out. One man in a hoodie held his camera steady, zooming in silently. A woman across the aisle whispered, "That's not right." Another said, "They're filming her like she's a criminal." One of the guards, visibly sweating, glanced at Veronica for confirmation. She gave a curt nod. "Remove her." But the moment the guard reached toward Naomi's arm, Elliot's voice thundered over the speaker. "Do not touch her. This is a direct order from executive leadership. I'm on my way now. Keep your hands off Dr. Ellis and stop all transactions at once." Carly gasped. Brittany let out a choked breath. Dennis's mouth hung open, and Veronica's face, suddenly bloodless, froze. But Naomi. She simply folded her arms, standing tall amid the sea of disbelief and quiet, shifting shame. The storm had only just begun, and its eye, calm, unshaken, and resolute, was standing right there at window 5. The silence that followed Elliot Grant's voice was immediate and absolute. Not a paper shuffled, not a heel clicked. The weight of authority that had so comfortably rested on Veronica Tate's shoulders moments earlier vanished in an instant, replaced by the ice-cold realization that she was no longer in control. Naomi Ellis stood tall at the counter, calm and unshaken, while the speakerphone on the desk cast Elliot's voice like a judge in a courtroom. "I said, do not touch her." His words weren't loud, but they were final. The two guards, who just seconds ago had moved with mechanical confidence, now froze mid-step, their hands hovering awkwardly in the air. One of them, an older man with a buzz cut, took a half step back, exchanging a quick glance with his partner. The younger one swallowed hard and lowered his hands completely. Naomi didn't move. She didn't gloat. She didn't blink. She simply waited, eyes steady, like a woman who knew the storm was no longer at her feet, but in the eyes of those who had summoned it. Veronica's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. Instead, she backed away from the counter, her heels clicking on the tile with a sudden hollowness. Dennis Shaw, who had up to that moment worn the self-assured smirk of someone who believed they were untouchable, now looked like a man realizing he'd stepped into quicksand. His mouth opened, then closed. He reached for the desk behind him, steadying himself as though he needed the wood grain to remind him where he stood. Brittany Hale, who had questioned Naomi's identity and flagged her to Dennis in the first place, stood stiff at her post, her fingers clenched white around her mouse. She wasn't typing. She couldn't. Her screen had gone dark minutes ago, but her nerves had long since crashed. Across the lobby, the customers, once quiet observers, were no longer just watching. Phones had been raised. Quiet whispers turned into hushed commentary. She called someone big. Did she say Grant, like the Elliot Grant? Did they really just try to throw her out for withdrawing her own money? A woman in a burgundy coat slowly turned her phone landscape and started recording in earnest, while a young man in a hoodie had already started live streaming on social media. The lobby, once a place where low voices and financial decorum ruled, had transformed into something else entirely. A stage, a reckoning, a powder keg of accountability waiting to be lit. From the speakerphone, Elliot's voice came again, this time calmer but laced with urgency. Naomi, I've already initiated access to the Midtown branch feed. Legal and HR are with me? Sit tight. I'll be there in 12 minutes. Security staff, listen carefully. You are not to touch Dr. Ellis. Anyone who attempts to remove her from that premises will be subject to immediate review and possible dismissal. Am I understood? The older security guard cleared his throat. Yes, sir. His voice cracked. Understood. Naomi lowered the phone from the counter, ending the call without fanfare. The room stayed still, every person present suspended between disbelief and something dangerously close to shame. It was then, and only then, that Veronica found her voice. You don't understand what's happening here, she stammered. We were following protocol. Naomi looked directly at her. The stare wasn't aggressive. It was exacting. It was the kind of gaze that disarmed even the most practiced liar, not because it accused, but because it didn't need to. No, Ms. Tate, Naomi replied. You were following assumptions. Behind her, Dennis shifted uncomfortably, as if the tiles under his feet had turned to glass. Brittany looked down at the withdrawal slip still sitting on the counter, untouched. The tension thickened, not with noise, but with consequence. Upstairs on the 35th floor of Harrington Tower, the air was no less electric. A row of executives, all stone-faced and locked in silence, watched a live stream feed play out on a massive wall-mounted monitor. Naomi Ellis standing tall at the counter. Veronica Tate visibly shaken. Guards retreating, customers filming. It wasn't just a bad look. It was damning. Chairwoman Rebecca Langford, a silver-haired woman in a cobalt blazer, didn't blink. This confirms everything she said quietly. We've had reports for months. Elliot Grant stood beside her, his arms folded, his jaw tight. This isn't just poor judgment. This is systemic. Rebecca nodded to the compliance officer. Start documentation. Every minute of that lobby feed is now evidence. Cross-reference with the names on shift. We'll need legal statements ready by close of day. In the branch, Dennis turned to Brittany with a hushed voice that barely masked his panic. Go get the files from yesterday's large withdrawals, he whispered. Now. Brittany hesitated. Her voice was hoarse. What for? Just do it. But she didn't move. Instead, she turned toward Naomi. Dr. Ellis, I didn't know. Naomi gently raised a hand. Don't finish that sentence, she said, her voice low but unmistakably sharp. Because if you didn't know how to treat people fairly until you knew their title, that's the problem. A few feet away, Carly Benson, the front desk receptionist who had brushed Naomi off without so much as eye contact, sat frozen behind her monitor, fingers hovering above the keyboard, as if words might fix what was unraveling around her. They couldn't. A door in the far corner swung open suddenly. For a heartbeat, the room turned toward it. It wasn't Elliot yet, just another customer, but even they paused in the doorway, clearly sensing they'd walked into something heavy. The customer turned right back around. Nobody blamed them. Naomi took a seat near the front now, not hidden in the far corner, like when she first arrived. Her tote rested beside her. She folded her hands again in her lap, still composed, still watching. Veronica stepped back behind the teller line, trying to regain composure, but her voice betrayed her. Everyone back to work, she snapped, her tone brittle. This situation is being handled. No one moved. Not Dennis. Not Brittany. Not Carly. The guards didn't even return to post, because whatever illusion of authority Veronica once commanded had collapsed under the weight of exposed truth. Elliot Grant arrived just over 11 minutes later, his gray suit damp with the spring humidity, outside his assistant trailing behind him, with a tablet already open. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. He walked straight to Naomi, stopped and extended a hand. "Dr. Ellis," he said, his voice low but resolute. "Are you all right?" Naomi stood. "I am now." He turned to face the lobby. Every staff member still on duty froze. Every camera phone turned. "Let me be absolutely clear to everyone in this building," Elliot said. "Dr. Naomi Ellis is not only a longtime client of this institution. She is the president of Harrington Trust Cooperative Division. And for the last 2 hours, the board has watched her be humiliated, profiled, and nearly removed from her own bank by individuals who failed not just in professionalism, but in basic humanity." The gasp that followed was sharp, audible. Carly Benson's hands covered her mouth. Dennis staggered back a step. Brittany looked like she might faint. Elliot continued, "This branch is now under internal investigation. All staff on duty are suspended pending full review. Those directly involved in discriminatory behavior will be subject to termination and further legal review. Effective immediately." The lobby was silent again, but this time it was reverent. Customers who had watched this unfold began clapping, first softly, then louder, not out of spectacle, but solidarity. Naomi didn't bow, didn't smile. She simply nodded once and turned to face the very counter where everything had begun. The withdrawal slip was still there. Elliot handed it to the teller at window 3, a young woman who had remained uninvolved the entire time. "Process this now, and apologize to her properly." The woman nodded. "Yes, sir." Naomi didn't need vindication in volume. Her power didn't come from a title or a salary. It came from knowing exactly who she was and refusing to let anyone, not even a branch manager with a shiny nameplate, define her otherwise. Justice hadn't finished its work yet, but for the first time that morning, it had begun. The moment Dr. Naomi Ellis stepped away from the teller window and Elliot Grant's voice rang through the lobby, the entire branch seemed to hold its breath. No one moved. No one dared. The woman who had stood in faded jeans and a plain jacket only moments ago, humiliated and questioned, now stood as the unshakable center of power. Elliot, executive vice president of Harrington Trust, turned to face the room with calm intensity. "Let me say this once so there's no confusion," he announced, his voice slicing clean through the frozen silence. "You're all standing in the presence of Dr. Naomi Ellis, president of our cooperative division. The board of directors has been watching every minute of this incident live. Every word, every action, every failure. The shock that washed over the staff was instant and brutal." Carly Benson's face drained of color. Her manicured fingers gripped the reception desk as if it might keep her upright. Dennis Shaw's confident posture collapsed in on itself, as though 100 invisible pounds were suddenly pressing against his chest. Brittany Hale choked on a breath she couldn't catch. And Veronica Tate, the branch manager whose voice had once commanded the room, now stood motionless behind the teller-lined lips, parted eyes wide as the enormity of her mistake came crashing down. Naomi didn't flinch. She stood tall, shoulders, squared eyes steady. She didn't need to speak. Her silence spoke volumes. Elliot stepped forward, facing Veronica directly. "You denied a lawful transaction. You called security on a valued client. You refused to look past what you saw on the surface. That alone is enough for dismissal." Veronica stammered, I didn't know who she was, and that's precisely the problem," Elliot cut in sharply. "You don't get to decide who deserves dignity based on a handbag or hairstyle. You don't get to deny service based on your assumptions." The room remained silent, but for the hush buzz of phones still recording the quiet sobs of Brittany trying to contain her shame and the growing realization that the ground beneath their feet had permanently shifted. Naomi stepped forward now, her voice as composed as it was clear. "For years, clients like me, people of color, people dressed modestly, people who don't fit your profile, have been mistreated in spaces like this. Harrington Trust was supposed to be different. That's why I took this job. That's why I came here today to see it for myself." Her eyes scanned the staff, landing on each face without flinching. "And I did." She turned to Elliot and gave a single nod. He understood. Effective immediately, he said, Veronica Tate, Dennis Shaw, and Carly Benson. You are terminated for gross misconduct, discriminatory treatment, and violation of our client dignity policy. Veronica gasped. Dennis looked like the breath had been knocked from his lungs. Carly began to cry. Please, Carly whispered. I didn't mean, you meant every choice you made. Naomi answered, not cruelly, but with unwavering truth. Your smile, your tone, your dismissal. Those are not mistakes. They're patterns. Elliot continued. Brittany Hale and both members of security, pending investigation. You are suspended with immediate effect. Your roles will be reviewed by legal and HR by the end of the day. Brittany nodded slowly, tears streaking down her cheeks. The two security guards stood like statues, ashamed but silent. The crowd of customers watched in stunned quiet. And then, like a slow ripple, applause began. One clap, then another. Then a wave of approval as customers, black, white, old, young, began to cheer. Not in celebration of punishment, but in acknowledgement of justice, in respect for someone who hadn't just spoken up, but had dismantled the system from within. Naomi's face remained steady, her expression full of quiet strength. She raised her hand slightly and the room fell respectfully quiet again. I didn't come here to fire people, she said, but silence in the face of injustice is complicity. If we're going to build a financial institution that truly serves all people, it starts here. It starts now. Cameras rolled, phones streamed. A dozen social media clips would hit the internet within the hour, each capturing a different moment of this reckoning. And as Naomi looked out across the lobby, she saw not just stunned employees or relieved customers, she saw possibility. Real change. Accountability that could spread far beyond the walls of this branch. Elliot stepped back and let her finish. Naomi turned slightly, looking at the employees who hadn't spoken, who hadn't laughed, but who also hadn't intervened. Some of you might be thinking, but I wasn't part of this. Let me be clear, watching injustice and saying nothing is also a choice. Going forward, Harrington Trust will be implementing mandatory equity training, client treatment evaluations, and rotating undercover audits of every major branch. No one will be exempt. If you're uncomfortable with that, this may not be the place for you anymore. The weight of her words settled on the air like final judgment, and yet it wasn't cold. It was resolute. It was what reform looked like. Naomi moved toward the reception desk. She picked up the visitor log, the very book she had signed when she arrived, unnoticed, ignored, invisible. She flipped it closed. We will no longer accept respect that's reserved for appearances. Respect is not earned by wearing a suit. It's not determined by your zip code or your skin tone. From this day forward, every person who walks through those doors will be treated like they belong, because they do. As she walked back to the center of the lobby, Elliot joined her. The applause came again, not chaotic but thunderous. A woman with a cane stood and clapped. A young man in sneakers nodded tearfully. Another customer whispered, "This story's going to change everything." And it did. Within hours, the footage went viral. The headlines exploded. Top bank exec exposes discrimination from within. Undercover CEO sparks reckoning at major financial institution. News anchors, civil rights advocates, and banking analysts all weighed in. Dr. Naomi Ellis became a symbol not just of dignity, but of what it means to hold power with humility. What it means to use your platform not to boast, but to break barriers. She returned to headquarters that evening, not with fanfare, but with focus. She had work to do. Policies to rewrite, people to protect, and a new standard to set. But before leaving the branch that morning, before stepping out into the sunlight, she turned once more to face the crowd, those still filming, those simply watching. Her voice was soft, but every word rang with strength. Dignity, she said, is not a luxury. Respect is not optional. And justice starts wherever someone dares to speak up. Then she walked through the front doors, not escorted, not questioned, not doubted. Just seen, fully, rightfully. And behind her, a bank finally beginning to understand the cost of silence and the power of change. In a world where appearances are too often mistaken for worth, the story of Dr. Naomi Ellis teaches us a profound and necessary lesson: dignity should never be conditional. This wasn't just a story about a bank transaction gone wrong. It was a story about silent systems, about bias in professional spaces, and about the quiet power of standing firm in the face of injustice. Dr. Ellis didn't yell. She didn't demand special treatment. She didn't walk in flaunting her status or titles. She walked in humbly as any ordinary person would, and she was treated accordingly, not with respect but with suspicion. The tragedy is not just what happened to her, but that this happens every day to people who don't have the title, the influence, or the platform to defend themselves. Her decision to go undercover was not just courageous, it was a mirror held up to an institution and to society. It revealed how easily people judge based on skin tone clothing or quiet demeanor, and it showed how quickly those in power will dismiss, discredit, and discard someone they believe doesn't belong. But when the truth came out, when the people in that branch realized who she really was, it wasn't just a plot twist, it was a wake-up call. So what can we learn from Naomi's story? Treat everyone with respect, not because of what they wear, not because of who they might be, but because it is right. It costs nothing to show kindness, to listen without judgment, and to lead with fairness. And if you are someone in a position of power at work in your community, or even in your family, use it to protect, not to belittle. Use it to lift others up, not push them aside. And for those who witness injustice in silence, remember this silence is complicity. Doing nothing when someone is being mistreated is still a choice that protects the wrong side. Dr. Ellis didn't need to raise her voice to make an impact. Her composure, her integrity, and her courage did what so many louder actions could not. It changed the game. It changed the culture. It reminded us that the most powerful form of justice often starts with a single person saying, "This is not okay." From the team at US Daily Story, we want to thank you for watching, listening, and reflecting with us. If this story moved you, we invite you to share it. You never know who might need to hear it today. Let's continue to speak up, stand tall, and believe in a world where justice is not reserved for the powerful, but available to all. Thank you for being here, and thank you for standing on the side of dignity, truth, and change.